In the dim, oil-scented workshops of Supermarine's experimental hangar at Southampton, England, in the sweltering summer of 1941, a lanky engineer named Reginald V. Jones hunched over a cluttered workbench, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows and his face smeared with grease. The war had raged for 2 years, and the Battle of Britain had etched deep lines of exhaustion into the faces of men like him, those unsung heroes who toiled not on the front lines, but in the shadows of innovation, racing against the Luftwaffe's relentless advance. Reginald, a brilliant but eccentric mind poached from the Royal Aircraft Establishment, fiddled with a scale model of the Supermarine Spitfire, its elegant elliptical wings a symbol of British defiance. He was obsessed with speed, convinced that the fighter's Merlin engine, already a marvel, could be pushed further if only the propeller could be tamed. The standard 3-bladed air screw whipped through the air efficiently enough, but it wasted power in torque that twisted the fuselage and limited top speed to around 370 miles per hour. Impressive, yet woefully inadequate against the sleek Messerschmitt Bf 109s that still prowled the channel. Reginald muttered to himself, sketching frantic diagrams of interlocking blades, his colleagues dismissing his notions as the ravings of a man who'd spent too many nights poring over wind tunnel data. Contra-rotating, he whispered, the words tasting like forbidden alchemy. It was an idea borrowed from naval engineering, where twin propellers spun in opposite directions to cancel torque, but applying it to aircraft was uncharted territory, risky, complex, and what some called idiotic. Yet in Reginald's eyes, it was the key to transforming the Spitfire from a guardian angel into a supersonic demon, capable of outrunning and outmaneuvering anything the Axis could throw at them. As bombs occasionally rattled the hangar roof from distant raids, he worked undeterred, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the electric thrill of possibility. The year was pivotal. With American aid trickling in and the threat of invasion looming, every incremental gain in performance could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. Reginald's team, a ragtag group of draftsmen and machinists, including the steadfast Tom Hargrove, who handled the metallurgy, and young prodigy Eliza Thorne, the only woman in the section and a whiz at aerodynamics, gathered around him that evening. They shared cigarettes and black tea, debating the feasibility over blueprints stained with T-rings. "It's madness," Tom grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow. "The weight alone will drag us down." But Eliza, her sharp eyes scanning the sketches, nodded slowly. "If we balance it right, the torque cancellation could add 20, maybe 30 knots. Imagine a Spitfire hitting 400 miles per hour without redesigning the airframe." Reginald's heart raced. This was more than engineering. It was a personal crusade. He'd lost his brother in the skies over Dunkirk, a hurricane pilot shredded by flak, and every blueprint he drew was a vow to prevent another such tragedy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hangar, Reginald soldered the final connection on his model propeller, the twin sets of blades gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. He stepped back, exhaling sharply, unaware that this idiotic contraption would one day propel the Spitfire to legendary speeds. But for now, it was just a spark in the forge of war. The initial tests began under the cover of dawn, the Supermarine team trucking the modified Spitfire prototype, dubbed Tempest in jest for its stormy ambitions, to a secluded runway on the outskirts of Farnborough. It was October 1941, and the autumn chill bit through their woolen coats as Reginald climbed into the observer's seat behind the test pilot, squadron leader Geoffrey Quill, a veteran of the Battle of Britain, whose calm demeanor masked the scars of dogfights that had claimed too many friends. The aircraft, a standard Spitfire MPH, retrofitted with the experimental contra-rotating propeller, looked deceptively ordinary from the ground, its fuselage painted in the familiar dark green camouflage. But beneath the cowling, the two sets of 3 blades, fore and aft, spinning in opposition, promised revolution. Ground crew swarmed like ants, finalizing torque linkages and fuel lines, while Eliza double-checked the vibration dampeners, her calculator clicking furiously. "If this doesn't harmonize, it'll shake the wings off," she warned, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Reginald nodded, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. The Merlin 45 engine would deliver 470 horsepower, but the props needed to convert that raw power into thrust without the usual rotational drag. As the engine roared to life, the unique whine of the contra-rotating blades filled the air, a high-pitched symphony that set teeth on edge. Quill taxied the Spitfire down the runway, the torque forces now neutralized, allowing straighter acceleration without the pilot wrestling the stick. Liftoff was smooth, almost unnaturally so, and as the plane climbed to 10,000 feet, Reginald gripped the edge of his seat, peering through the canopy at the dials. Speed built steadily. 200, 250, 300 miles per hour. But then, at 350, vibrations rattled through the airframe like 1,000 angry bees. "Ease off," Reginald shouted into the intercom. But Quill, ever the professional, pushed on, noting the improved climb rate. 1,000 feet per minute, faster than stock. The test lasted 20 agonizing minutes, circling back with smoke trailing from a stressed bearing. On landing, the team rushed forward, faces a mix of elation and dread. The props had worked, adding a tantalizing 15 miles per hour to the top end, but the mechanical strain was evident. Blades misaligned under load, and the added weight shifted the center of gravity. Tom Hargrove cursed as he inspected the damage, his calloused hands tracing hairline cracks in the hub. "We need stronger alloys. Titanium if we can get it from the Yanks." Reginald paced, undaunted, sketching revisions on a notepad. Word reached the higher-ups at the Air Ministry that week, a terse memo labeling the concept promising but perilous. Skeptics abounded. Lord Beaverbrook, the Minister of Aircraft Production, reportedly scoffed at the idea during a cabinet meeting, calling it a Rube Goldberg contraption, unfit for the urgency of war. Yet Reginald pressed on, rallying his team through late-night sessions fueled by adrenaline and smuggled rations. Eliza proposed hydraulic actuation for finer blade pitch control, while Tom sourced experimental steels from Sheffield forges battered by Blitz debris. By December, with snow blanketing the runways, they had a second prototype ready, this one with refined gearing to reduce friction. The war's tide was turning. Rommel's Afrika Korps stalled at Tobruk, and the first Arctic convoys to Murmansk tested the Allies' resolve. Reginald felt the weight of it all, knowing his invention could tip the scales in the air war. As Quill fired up the engine once more, the contra-prop spun with a deeper, more harmonious growl, and Reginald allowed himself a rare smile. The path to 470 miles per hour was fraught. But the monster was awakening. Challenges mounted as winter gripped Britain, turning the supermarine facilities into a frozen labyrinth of half-assembled fuselages and frost-rimed tools. Reginald's team worked in shifts, battling not just the cold, but bureaucratic red tape that strangled innovation. The Air Ministry demanded proof of concept amid resource shortages, aluminum rationed for bombers, skilled labor diverted to Lancaster production. One evening in January 1942, as Reginald pored over telemetry from the latest flight, a memo arrived. The project was to be shelved in favor of proven Merlin upgrades. Fury boiled in him. He slammed his fist on the desk, scattering pencils. "They don't see it," he confided to Eliza over a lukewarm cup of cocoa in the mess hall. "The BF-109E is hitting 390 now with their DB-601 engines. We need this edge." Eliza, ever the optimist, squeezed his arm. "Show them the data. The climb rate alone proves it." Tom, nursing a bandaged hand from a lathe mishap, grunted agreement. "And the maneuverability. No more sideslip in turns." Undeterred, Reginald volunteered for a risky demonstration flight himself, pulling strings with old Ray contacts. Training commenced in a simulator cobbled from Spitfire spares, where he learned the nuances of the contra-props. The way they eliminated propeller torque allowed tighter rolls and sharper dives without compensatory rudder input. By February, with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor shifting global focus, approval came, grudgingly, for a full-scale trial at Boscombe Down. The test aircraft, now incorporating a boosted Merlin 60 series engine, taxied under a leaden sky. Reginald, in the rear seat, felt the vibration smooth out as Quill accelerated. At 20,000 feet, they unleashed the beast. Throttle wide open, the contra-props bit into the thin air with ferocious efficiency. Instruments climbed, 380, 400, 410 miles per hour. The airframe groaned, but held. Then, disaster. A blade on the rear prop sheared under centrifugal force, sending shards whipping past the canopy. Quill banked hard, fighting for control as the plane shuddered. "Eject the canopy!" Reginald yelled, but Quill stabilized it, nursing the wounded bird back to base on asymmetric thrust. On the ground, medics swarmed. But miraculously, both men emerged unscathed. The incident could have killed the project, yet it revealed critical flaws. The props needed variable pitch synchronization and reinforced composites. Reginald spent weeks in recovery, his mind ablaze with solutions, sketching from his hospital bed. Allies poured in. American engineers from Wright Aeronautical shared turbocharger tech, while Canadian factories ramped up Merlin production. By spring, with the Dieppe raids lessons fresh, highlighting the need for air superiority, Reginald's team iterated relentlessly. Eliza's pitch control mechanism, a hydraulic marvel, tamed the blade's fury, and Tom's alloys withstood 5,000 RPM without fracturing. Test flights resumed, each one peeling back layers of the Spitfire's potential. At 30,000 feet in May, under clear skies, the speedometer nudged 430 miles per hour, the contra-props a blur of counter-spinning fury. Reginald watched from the tower, tears blurring his vision, not from wind, but from the dawning realization that his idiotic dream was forging a weapon that could rewrite the skies. As summer 1942 bloomed into a deceptive calm, the supermarine hangar buzzed with renewed purpose, the contra-rotating propeller evolving from prototype oddity to production contender. Reginald, now gaunt from ceaseless toil, coordinated with Rolls-Royce at Derby, where the Merlin XX was supercharged for higher altitudes, synergizing with the prop's torque-free thrust. The team expanded, incorporating feedback from frontline pilots. The improved directional stability meant deadlier scissor maneuvers in dogfights, turning the Spitfire from agile dancer to predatory hawk. Yet doubts lingered. A rival project at de Havilland pushed for jet prototypes, whispering that props were relics. Reginald countered with hard numbers. His system added 50 miles per hour without fuel penalties, crucial for escorting bombers over the Ruhr. In July, during a pivotal evaluation, Squadron Leader Quill led a formation of 3 modified Spitfires against simulated Luftwaffe intercepts at Duxford. The contra-props hummed like vengeful spirits as they climbed, outpacing standard MKVs by 15 minutes to operational height. In mock combat, they evaded enemy fire with ease, the lack of torque allowing instantaneous yaw corrections. Ground telemetry confirmed it. Sustained speeds of 440 miles per hour in level flight, with bursts nearing 450 in dives. Cheers erupted as they landed, but Reginald's triumph was tempered. A memo from Winston Churchill's desk praised the progress, yet demanded integration into Seafire variants for carrier ops against Japan. Eliza, promoted to lead aerodynamicist, tackled the naval adaptations, folding wings and arrestor hooks, while Tom forged arrestor-resistant hubs. Personal tolls mounted. Reginald's wife wrote of ration hardships at home, and a V-1 buzz bomb razed a nearby street, killing 2 machinists. Through it all, Reginald drove forward, his vision unyielding. By August, with the tide turning at El Alamein, the first production run began. Spitfire Mk Wolfines, with contra-props earmarked for channel patrols. Test pilot Eric Brown, the legendary Winkle, took one up, clocking 460 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, the airframe singing under the strain. "It's a monster," Brown radioed, awe in his voice. Reginald, listening in, finally exhaled. The idiotic idea had birthed a legend. But the war demanded more, perfection in the face of invasion threats and looming D-Day. As leaves turned gold, he gazed at the assembly line, knowing the true test awaited in the blood-red skies over Europe. The path to supremacy intensified that autumn, with Reginald's team racing against the clock as intelligence reports painted grim pictures of Focke-Wulf-Ta 152 prototypes, German speed demons threatening Allied bombers. Modifications poured in, lightweight spinners to shave drag, and electronic governors for seamless prop synchronization. Eliza's innovation shone, her variable geometry allowing the blades to optimize for climb or sprint. In November, at a clandestine demo for Allied brass, including a Canadian liaison from the RCAF, a lone Spitfire with the full contra-rotating setup screamed past at 470 miles per hour, low over the Thames, its slipstream rattling windows. Gasps filled the observation post. The Canadians, fresh from Dieppe scars, saw salvation for their squadrons. Reginald stood tall, his idiotic contraption vindicated, yet he knew part 1 of the saga was merely the forge. The real fire of combat lay ahead. As the chill winds of December 1942 swept across the English countryside, Reginald V. Jones found himself thrust into the unforgiving crucible of operational trials, where the contra-rotating Spitfires would face not just the elements, but the Luftwaffe's cunning. The Air Ministry, buoyed by the Thames demonstration, greenlit deployment of the first squadron equipped with the modified MPHs, designated 602 Squadron, a mix of battle-hardened RAF pilots and fresh Canadian reinforcements from the Royal Canadian Air Force, their numbers bolstered by volunteers eager to avenge the Dieppe fiasco. Reginald traveled to the coastal airfield at Hawking, near Folkestone, where the sea mist clung to the runways like a shroud. There, amid the thunder of Merlin engines warming up, he met Flight Lieutenant James Harlan, a broad-shouldered Torontonian with a mustache that hid a perpetual scowl and eyes sharpened by months escorting convoys over the Atlantic. Harlan, commanding a flight of 4, gripped Reginald's hand firmly. "Heard your props turn these birds into greyhounds, mate. If they keep my lads alive against those Focke-Wulfs, I'll buy you a pint in Calgary after the war." The Canadians brought a rugged pragmatism to the unit, their drawls mixing with British accents as they pored over the new flight manuals. Eliza Thorne accompanied Reginald, clipboard in hand, briefing the pilots on the props' quirks. The seamless torque cancellation meant no more fighting the stick in tight turns, but the high RPMs demanded precise throttle management to avoid overspeed. Tom Hargrove stayed back at Supermarine, overseeing final tweaks to the spinners, but his alloys had proven their mettle in ground runs. The first patrols launched at dawn, the Contra-Spitfires slicing through the fog with a predatory grace, their top speeds allowing them to intercept raiders before they could scatter bombs over Dover. Reginald watched from the control tower, his breath fogging the glass, as Harlan's formation climbed to Angels 20,000 feet in record time, the prop's efficiency shaving precious minutes off response. Initial sorties were quiet, the Germans probing tentatively after their losses in the Channel Dash. But Reginald sensed the storm building. One evening, as snow flurries danced in the searchlights, a reconnaissance report arrived, a swarm of Bf 109Gs massing near Calais, likely prepping for a hit on shipping lanes. Harlan's voice crackled over the radio during the debrief. "She's a dream up there, Reg. Hit 455 level without breaking a sweat." Yet beneath the optimism lurked the war's grim undercurrent. A young Canadian wingman, Sergeant Pierre Duval from Montreal, confided his fears over bully beef in the mess tent. "Back home they think we're heroes. Here, it's just waiting to die." Reginald nodded, the weight of his brother's ghost pressing on him, and vowed silently that the props would be their shield. Tensions escalated through the bitter holiday season, with the Luftwaffe shifting tactics to low-level hit-and-run strikes, testing the Contra-Spitfire's versatility in ways wind tunnels never could. By January 1943, as the Battle of the Atlantic raged fiercer with U-boat wolfpacks sinking merchantmen off the Scilly Isles, 602 Squadron became the tip of the spear for coastal defense. Reginald embedded himself with the unit, sleeping on a cot in the ops room, his sketches evolving based on pilot feedback, minor adjustments to blade pitch for better low-altitude performance. Flight Lieutenant Harlan led the pivotal engagement on a slate-gray morning, when radar picked up a formation of 12 Ju-88 bombers, escorted by 8 FW-190s, arrowing toward a convoy off Ramsgate. The Contra-Spitfires scrambled, their engines barking to life with that distinctive counter-rotating whine, propelling them into the sky faster than any standard fighter. At 15,000 feet, Harlan's flight dove into the fray, the prop's torque-free stability allowing hairpin turns that left the Germans flat-footed. Reginald monitored from the ground, heart pounding as bursts of tracer fire lit the horizon. Harlan's voice cut through the static. "Tally-ho! Bandits at 2 o'clock low, closing fast." The Canadians shone. Sub-Lieutenant Alex Fraser, a Vancouver fisherman turned ace, locked onto a FW-190, his Spitfire rolling inverted without drift, the contra-props maintaining perfect trim. He fired a deflection shot that shredded the enemy's wing, sending it spiraling into the channel. But chaos reigned. A Ju-88's rear gunner raked Harlan's aircraft, bullets pinging off the armored glass. The flight pressed on, their superior speed enabling hit-and-fade tactics. Zoom climbs to 470 miles per hour in shallow dives, then looping back to pounce. 4 bombers plummeted smoking into the sea, but victory came at a cost. Sergeant Duval's plane took a cannon shell to the engine, the contra-props windmilling uselessly as he bailed out over the Whitecaps. Rescue launches sped out, but the cold water claimed him before they arrived. Back at base, Harlan landed with his canopy starred by flak, clapping Reginald on the back. "Your monster saved us. But it can't stop everything." Eliza, analyzing the gun camera footage, noted how the props allowed 20% more firing passes, her calculations confirming the edge in sustained dogfights. Tom wired congratulations from Southampton, his new lightweight hubs ready for retrofit. Yet as the squadron mourned Duval with a simple flypast, Reginald grappled with the human toll, the idiotic invention now stained with blood. The Germans, sensing the threat, adapted, dispatching high-altitude cirrus formations to exploit any weaknesses, but the Contra-Spitfire's climb rate kept them dominant, buying time for the Allies' growing bomber offensive. Spring thawed the runways, but not the resolve. As 1943 unfolded with the squadron rotating to Biggin Hill for intensified training against simulated threats, incorporating lessons from North Africa, where Desert Air Force pilots clamored for the upgrades. Reginald's role expanded. He liaised with the RCAF High Command in Ottawa via encrypted cables, arguing for Canadian production lines to churn out Merlin engines optimized for the props. The Canadians in 602 Squadron, now half the strength, with reinforcements like Flying Officer Liam Kerr from Ottawa, a former logger with a knack for mechanics, became the system's fiercest advocates. Kerr, tinkering with his own aircraft during downtime, praised the stability. "No more wrestling the beast in crosswinds, it's like she flies herself." Eliza led simulations, using a mock-up cockpit to drill pilots on emergency desynchronization if a prop failed, her calm explanations masking the dread of mid-air failures. Tom arrived with a truckload of prototypes, his hands blackened from forge work, installing the latest iteration, contra-props with self-lubricating bearings to withstand G-forces up to 8 Gs. The war's global scope intruded. News of Stalingrad's fall reached them via BBC, a morale boost, but so did reports of Japanese Zeros outmaneuvering Allied fighters in the Pacific, underscoring the need for speed everywhere. In April, during a joint exercise with American P-47 Thunderbolts, the Spitfires demonstrated their prowess, outrunning the heavier Yanks in intercepts and turning tighter circles thanks to the neutralized torque. Reginald watched Harlan vector his flight against enemy Mustangs, the contra-props blurring into invisibility as they hit 465 miles per hour in a mock pursuit. But realism intruded harshly. A training mishap saw a young pilot overstress the blades in a high-speed pass, the rear prop fragmenting and forcing a dead stick landing. The inquiry cleared the design, blaming pilot error, but Reginald iterated overnight, refining the governors with Eliza's input. Personal strains mounted. Letters from home spoke of blackout hardships, and Reginald's wife urged him to transfer to safer R&D, but he refused, haunted by visions of what unupgraded Spitfires might face over Normandy. By May, with the squadron primed for D-Day rehearsals, the Contra-Spitfires logged over 500 hours, their speeds consistently breaching 470 in controlled bursts, transforming patrols into proactive hunts. Harlan, nursing a healed shrapnel wound, shared a quiet smoke with Reginald at dusk. "This isn't just about knots on the dial, it's about coming home." The engineer's nod was heavy, the forge of innovation now tempered in combat's fire. The crescendo built through summer's relentless heat as intelligence fused the Contra-Spitfire into the broader Allied strategy, with Reginald briefing generals on its role in securing air superiority for Operation Overlord. Deployed to forward bases in Kent, 602 Squadron flew cover for shipping and probed French airspace, their props enabling daring ferry runs to deliver agents behind lines. Flying Officer Kerr led a notable sortie in June, intercepting a reconnaissance WW2 off Le Havre, the Contra setup allowing him to close from 5 miles out in under a minute, guns blazing to down the intruder before it could relay positions. Reginald, now a fixture in the dispersal hut, analyzed each mission's data, his notebooks filling with marginal gains. A 10% reduction in fuel burn at cruise, vital for long-range escorts. Eliza's hydraulic refinements prevented the vibrations that had plagued early models, while Tom's composites resisted battle damage better than standard props. The Canadian contingent grew, with Sergeant Connor McLeod from Halifax joining, his enthusiasm infectious as he mastered the aircraft's responsiveness. Yet the Luftwaffe struck back viciously. In July, during a ferry protection op, Harlan's formation tangled with a dozen Bf-109s in a swirling melee over the Somme estuary. The Contra-Spitfires danced through the furball, their speed permitting boom and zoom tactics, dive, strike, evade, that frustrated the slower Germans. Fraser claimed 2 kills, his voice exultant over the RT. "These props are wizardry." But a lucky 20mm round clipped McLeod's tail, sending him into a spin from which he barely recovered, ditching in the shallows and swimming to a MTB pickup. The squadron's tally rose, 18 confirmed victories that month, but losses mounted too. A grim arithmetic Reginald tallied nightly. Churchill himself cabled praise, calling the props the unsung blades of victory, spurring production to outfit more RCAF wings. As August waned, with the Italian campaign siphoning resources, Reginald faced a crossroads. Scale up for mass deployment or refine for high-altitude bombers. He chose both, collaborating with de Havilland on hybrid variants. Eliza confided her exhaustion over tea, her promotion bittersweet amid the mounting dead. Tom, visiting with reinforced gear, shared stories of Sheffield's resilience, a reminder that the home front forged as fiercely as the front lines. Harlan, scarred but unbroken, raised a toast in the officers' mess. To the monsters that keep the wolves at bay. Reginald clinked glasses, the taste of victory laced with sorrow, knowing the true baptism awaited the beaches of Normandy. By autumn's golden haze, the contra-rotating Spitfires had etched their legend into the annals of the air war. But Reginald sensed the saga's pivot toward the invasion's fury, where speeds of 470 miles per hour would clash against fortified skies. Rotated to Manston for final prep, 602 Squadron integrated with Typhoon units, the Canadians' grit meshing with the RAF's precision. Kerr, promoted after his WW2 kill, tested the limits in solo runs, pushing the props to their edge over the wash, clocking sustained 468 in level flight before throttling back. Reginald oversaw the handover of blueprints to Canadian factories in Montreal, ensuring the tech crossed the Atlantic for home defense variants. Eliza spearheaded safety protocols, her simulation saving lives by anticipating prop failures in combat stress. Tom's final alloy batch, infused with rare earths from American allies, promised durability against flak bursts. Whispers of Overlord leaked, dummy fleets massing in the Solent, and the squadron flew feints to draw German eyes. In a tense September skirmish, Harlan's flight ambushed a hit squad targeting Mulberry Harbors, the contra-props enabling a pincer from altitude that routed the attackers, though Fraser took grazing hits, limping home with oil slicking his wings. The toll deepened. News of Italian armistice brought hope, but V2 tests in Peenemünde demanded preemptive strikes the Spitfires couldn't yet reach. Reginald, gaunt and driven, sketched night and day, his mind on the beaches where brothers like his would storm. A coded order arrived, full integration for D-Day air umbrella. As leaves fell like spent casings, Harlan gathered the pilots, Reginald at his side. "We've tamed the monster. Now we unleash it." The engineer met their eyes, the idiotic dream realized in steel and fire, yet the horizon darkened with the shadow of greater battles, where every mile per hour might spell survival or oblivion. As the first hints of 1944's resolve hardened into the steel of preparation, Reginald V. Jones felt the inexorable pull of Overlord drawing his creation into the maelstrom. At Manston Airfield, the contra-rotating Spitfires lined up like hounds straining at the leash, their Merlin engines idling with a low, contrapuntal thrum that echoed the squadron's mounting anticipation. Flight Lieutenant James Harlan paced the dispersal hut, his Canadian drawl cutting through the haze of cigarette smoke as he drilled his pilots on the latest vectoring tactics, emphasizing how the prop's torque elimination turned evasive maneuvers into instinctive poetry. Reginald, sleeves rolled up amid stacks of weather charts and flak reports, collaborated with Eliza Thorne on final calibrations. Her hydraulic governors now responded to the slightest air pressure shift, ensuring the blades synchronized flawlessly even under the duress of flak bursts. Tom Hargrove had dispatched a convoy of reinforced spinners from Supermarine, their lightweight alloys tested to endure the G-forces of prolonged dives at 470 miles per hour. The Canadian pilots, a backbone of 602 Squadron, infused the unit with unyielding tenacity. Flying Officer Liam Kerr from Ottawa joked about trading his axe for a joystick, while the newly arrived Sergeant Owen Bennett, a sturdy farmhand from Saskatchewan with a quiet faith in machinery, pored over the manuals by lantern light. News from the fronts filtered in, the Anzio landings bogged down in mud and blood, reminding them that air cover could make or break the invasion. Reginald confided in Harlan during a rare lull, the two men sharing a flask of illicit rye smuggled from Canadian stores. "These props aren't just faster, they're forgiving. In the chaos over the beaches, that could mean the difference between a kill and a coffin." Harlan nodded, his eyes distant, haunted by the ghosts of Dieppe, where unupgraded fighters had faltered. As fog rolled in from the channel, the squadron flew practice scrambles, the Contra Spitfires vaulting skyward in under 2 minutes, their superior climb rates mocking the standard models trailing behind. Eliza monitored telemetry from a jury-rigged van, her calculations confirming sustained speeds that would allow them to sweep the invasion fleets clean of intruders. Yet doubt gnawed at Reginald. Intelligence whispered of German radar enhancements along the Pas de Calais, and the Luftwaffe's dwindling numbers hid desperate innovations like the Me-262 jet, a specter that could render props obsolete overnight. In the mess, Owen Bennett voiced the unspoken fear, his broad hands fidgeting with a model Spitfire. What if they come at us with something we can't outrun? Reginald clapped his shoulder, forcing conviction into his voice. Then we outthink them. These blades were born from madness. They'll end in legend. The winter's end brought relentless rehearsals, faint patrols to draw fire, night flights to simulate blackout ops, each sortie honing the contra-prop's edge, their whine a siren song over the darkening waves. The eve of D-Day dawned with a deceptive serenity on June 5, 1944. But beneath the calm 602 squadron thrummed with the electric tension of destiny. Reginald stood on the windswept tarmac at Manston, watching ground crews swarm the aircraft like bees around nectar, arming cannons and topping off tanks with 100-octane fuel that amplified the Merlin's roar. Harlan gathered his flight leaders, Kerr, Fraser, and the steadfast Bennett, for a final briefing in the ops room, maps pinned with red threads marking the Normandy coast. "Weather's holding. We'll be the eyes and fists for the Armada," Harlan said, his voice steady as the North Atlantic gales he'd weathered. Eliza distributed updated charts, her annotations highlighting optimal altitudes where the contra-props excelled, 15,000 feet for intercepts, where thin air let them hit 470 without strain. Tom Hargrove, who'd driven up from Southampton overnight, inspected the hubs personally, his grease-streaked face creased in a rare grin. "These babies'll spin till the Jerrys cry, 'Uncle.'" The Canadians, comprising over half the squadron now, drew strength from their shared heritage. Letters from home, bundled in kits, spoke of pride and prayers from families in Toronto and Winnipeg, fueling their resolve. As dusk fell, the order came. "Stand by for H-hour." Reginald's mind raced back to the hangar's dim beginnings, the idiotic sketches that had birthed this fleet, 30 Contra Spitfires ready to carve a corridor through the skies. He joined Harlan on a catwalk overlooking the flight line, the prop's idle spin casting flickering shadows. "Your boys are ready," Reginald murmured. Harlan lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly. "It's not just speed, it's trust. In you, in the machine." Sleep evaded them that night. In the distance, the Solent hummed with the murmur of 5 ships assembling, a floating city poised to reclaim Europe. At 0400 on June 6th, the klaxons wailed, and the squadron scrambled into the pre-dawn gloom, the Contra Spitfires hurtling down the runway with acceleration that pinned pilots to their seats. Reginald monitored from the tower, his heart sinking with the RT chatter. Blue section airborne, climbing to Angels 10. As the first rays pierced the horizon, Harlan's formation streaked toward the beaches, the props propelling them at 450 miles per hour, outdistancing any threat. But the Luftwaffe was waiting, radar-guided patrols rising from Abbeville. A swarm of FW-190s and BF-109s, intent on shattering the invasion at its birth. Tracer fire soon laced the sky, and Reginald gripped the radio console, whispering prayers for the men who'd turn his dream into defiance. The Battle of the Beaches erupted in a symphony of fury, the Contra Spitfires plunging into the fray like avenging spirits over Sword and Juno sectors, where Canadian troops stormed the sands under withering fire. Harlan's flight led the charge, their aircraft diving from 20,000 feet at speeds cresting 470, the torque-free stability allowing precision rolls that evaded interlocking flak. Reginald listened in horror and awe as the radio crackled with the chaos. "Tally-ho! 6 bandits, 12 o'clock high!" Kerr's voice cut through, calm amid the storm, as he vectored Bennett into a trailing 109, the contra-props enabling a scissoring turn that positioned him for a perfect burst, the German fighter erupting in flames and spiraling toward the surf. Eliza, at a forward post near Portsmouth, plotted intercepts on her board, her updates relayed to the squadron. Bandits vectoring east, climb to 18, ISO 0 for advantage. The props proved their worth in the melee. Standard Spitfires nearby struggled with yaw in tight formations, but the Contra models weaved like threads through the needle's eye, downing 3 FW-190s in the first wave before the enemy scattered. Fraser claimed a Ju-88 limping from a coastal battery, his gun stitching the bomber's belly as it plummeted into the dunes. Yet the cost mounted swiftly. A 30mm shell from the opportunistic 109 grazed Harlan's wingman, the impact shearing a blade and forcing an emergency desync that saved the pilot, but sent the plane limping back with smoke trailing. Owen Bennett, in the thick of it, felt the airframe shudder under a near miss, the prop's whine rising to a scream as he pursued a fleeing swarm, his burst claiming 2 before fuel warnings blinked. On the ground, Reginald paced the ops room, Tom's voice crackling over the secure line from Supermarine. Replacements inbound. Hold the line. The Canadians fought with ferocious pride, their aircraft's speed allowing them to cover the landing craft, strafing gun emplacements that menaced the 3rd Canadian Division, clawing ashore at Courseulles. By midday, as paratroopers consolidated inland, the squadron's tally stood at 12 kills, but losses stung. A young RCAF pilot from Vancouver bought it in a head-on pass, his contra-Spitfire vanishing in a fireball over the breakers. Harlan radioed in hoarse triumph. "We've got the umbrella up, Reg, but it's hell up here." Eliza's analysis later confirmed the prop's edge. 25% more engagements won, their velocity turning potential routes into routes of the enemy. As the sun climbed, the skies cleared momentarily, the Contra monsters circling protectively, but Reginald knew the day's toll was just the opening salvo in a campaign that would test every rivet and resolve. Afternoon brought a relentless crescendo, the Luftwaffe committing reserves in desperate bids to stem the tide. Their Me-410s and Do-217s probing for weaknesses in the Allied armada. Reginald's vigil in the tower blurred into a haze of sweat and static as 602 Squadron rotated patrols, the Contra-Spitfires refueling mid-mission via slipstream tankers to maintain their high-speed sweeps. Harlan, nursing a superficial wound from shrapnel, handed off to Kerr for the next push, the Ottawa native leading a flight of 4 into a hornet's nest over Caen, where German armor massed to counter the beachheads. The prop's efficiency shone in the endurance test. Sustained 460 miles per hour patrols that intercepted raiders before they could bomb the Mulberry harbors, Bennett's section vectoring in to shred a formation of He-111s, their bombs splashing harmlessly into the channel. Eliza coordinated from her van, her voice a lifeline. Flak concentrations at grid 14, dive shallow and zoom. The engineering held. Tom's alloys withstood the vibrations of repeated dives, the hydraulic actuators preventing the blade flutter that had doomed earlier prototypes. Fraser, ever the daredevil, pushed his limits in a low-level strafe on a radar station, the Contra setup's stability letting him hug the terrain at 400 knots without drift, silencing the threat that could have guided more bombers. Canadian grit defined the hour. Kerr's flight, drawing from Diepp's bitter lessons, executed textbook finger-4 formations, the speed differential allowing them to dictate the fight, forcing the Germans into defensive spirals. Yet tragedy struck without mercy. In a swirling dogfight, a Bf-109's cannon fire caught Bennett's tail, the impact desynchronizing the rear prop and igniting the fuel lines. He fought the controls valiantly, broadcasting a defiant "Cheerio, lads," before bailing out over Allied lines, rescued by a Sherman crew but forever marked by burns. Reginald slammed his fist on the console, the human price etching deeper than any blueprint. Harlan, aloft again as dusk gathered, claimed the final kill of the day. A prowling 190 that strayed too close, pushing the squadron's score to 21. Tom's reinforcements arrived by truck, fresh props gleaming under blackout lamps, while Eliza tallied the data. The Contra system had multiplied effective air cover threefold, shielding the Canadians on Juno from annihilation. As night fell, the squadron stood down, exhausted pilots collapsing in bunks, their aircraft scarred but unbowed. Reginald met Harlan at debrief, the Torontonian's grip ironclad. "Your idiotic genius bought us the day, but tomorrow's another beast." The engineer nodded, the forge of war now a blazing inferno, where every victory whispered of the sacrifices yet to come. Twilight's respite shattered with the first salvos of sustained combat, as D-Day bled into a week of unrelenting skies, the Contra-Spitfires becoming the unbreakable spine of the invasion's air umbrella. Reginald embedded deeper, shuttling between Manston and forward strips in Normandy, his presence a talisman for the weary squadron. Kerr assumed interim command after Harlan's exhaustion sidelined him, the Canadian leading dawn patrols that clashed with resurgent Luftwaffe thrusts aimed at severing the beachhead supply lines. The prop's prowess peaked in these grueling hours. 470-mile-per-hour intercepts that turned potential massacres into managed threats. Fraser's flight downing a quartet of FW-190s escorting V-1 prototypes testing launch sites. Eliza's on-site adjustments, scribbled in the mud of a tented workshop, fine-tuned the governors for the humid coastal air, reducing overspeed incidents by half. Tom Hargrove arrived by Dakota, hauling crates of field repair kits, his hands raw from expedited forges back home. The Canadian pilots, bloodied but defiant, rotated through the maelstrom. Replacements like Corporal Henry Walker from Regina poured in, their fresh eyes widening at the Contra monster's ferocity. In a pivotal engagement over the Orne River, Kerr's section tangled with elite WW2 fighters, the torque cancellation enabling impossible climbing turns that reversed the ambush. Bennett, bandaged but back in the saddle, nailing a 109 with a snapshot that echoed across the RT. Flak claimed its due, shredding a wing on a support flight, but the prop's reinforced hubs allowed controlled glides to safe havens. Reginald witnessed the raw edge firsthand from a liaison jeep near Bayou, the whine of Merlins overhead a counterpoint to the rumble of artillery. Harlan, recovered, rejoined for a night op, their combined efforts sweeping a bomber stream that could have raised the artificial ports. By week's end, as the Allies pushed inland, the squadron's logs brimmed with aces, 30 kills, minimal losses, the Contra system credited in dispatches to Ottawa. Yet the toll lingered. Letters home censored? Mates buried in hasty graves, reminding Reginald that speed saved lives but couldn't resurrect them. As July loomed with the promise of breakout, he sketched evolutions for Pacific variants, the Idiotic spark now a global blaze, but the shadow of attrition loomed, demanding innovations as fierce as the battles yet to unfold. As the breakout from Normandy ignited in late July 1944, Operation Goodwood unleashed a thunderous Allied surge toward Falaise, where the contra-rotating Spitfires of 602 Squadron became the vengeful arbiters of the skies, their 470-mile-per-hour fury dictating the rhythm of destruction below. Reginald V. Jones, embedded at a makeshift forward base amid the bocage's tangled hedgerows, coordinated frantic repairs under canvas tents that flapped like wounded banners in the wind. Flight Lieutenant James Harlan, his mustache graying under the strain, led the squadron's depleted flights from a strip scarred by P-51 Mustangs and Typhoons, the Canadian pilot's resolve unyielding despite the mounting ledger of the fallen. Flying Officer Liam Kerr, now a flight commander with 3 kills etched on his fuselage, taxied his aircraft forward at dawn, the contra-prop's counter-spinning blur slicing the humid air with mechanical precision. Sergeant Owen Bennett, his burns hidden beneath a fresh uniform, climbed in beside him, sharing a nod of grim camaraderie born from shared scrapes over Juno. Eliza Thorne, sleeves rolled to her elbows in the grease of field mechanics, adjusted the hydraulic linkages on Kerr's machine, her voice cutting through the engine's growl. "She's tuned for the push. Hit 465 level and don't look back." Tom Hargrove, who'd commandeered a lorry from Caen with crates of spare blades forged in Sheffield's bomb-ravaged foundries, hammered reinforcements into place, his calloused hands a testament to the home front's quiet heroism. Intelligence buzzed with urgency. The German pocket at Falaise teetered, but Luftwaffe remnants, FW-190Ds and BF-109Ks, swarmed to cover the retreat, their pilots desperate to blunt the Canadian Second Corps' armored thrust under General Simons. Reginald pored over maps in the ops tent, his sketches evolving into urgent memos for RCAF upgrades back in Toronto, where factories hummed to produce contra-prop kits for home defense mosquitoes. As Harlan's formation lifted off, the Merlins thundered, propelling them over the Orne at speeds that outstripped the dust clouds of Shermans below, Kerr's voice crackling over the RT. "Eyes sharp, lads. Panzer divisions massing at grid Echo 7. The squadron dove into the cauldron, their torque-free agility turning the skies into a lethal ballet, Bennett's burst claiming a 190 that strayed too low, its wreckage cartwheeling into a wheat field where Canadian infantry cheered from foxholes. The Falaise Gap became a charnel house of steel and fire, where the Contra-Spitfire's supremacy unfolded in a relentless cascade of intercepts that sealed the trap on 2 German armies, their props engineering not just velocity, but the very tide of liberation. Reginald shuttled between strips, his jeep bouncing over shell-torn roads as he witnessed the aerial Armageddon firsthand, the whine of Merlins a constant hymn over the roar of artillery. Kerr's flight, vectored by Eliza's ground plots from a radio truck camouflaged in netting, plunged through a gauntlet of flak that bloomed like black orchids against the summer blue. The prop's stability shone in the maelstrom, sustained dives at 470 miles per hour without the dreaded swing that plagued standard fighters, allowing Fraser to loop back for a second pass on a Me-410 heavy fighter, his cannon stitching flames across its belly before it exploded in midair, debris raining on retreating Wehrmacht columns. Harlan, aloft in the thick of it, orchestrated the chaos with a veteran's poise, his Canadian drawl steady. "Bennett, take the straggler. Kerr, cover high." Owen Bennett obliged, the Contra setup's seamless yaw letting him snap onto a BF-109K without drift. His victory roll a defiant salute to the troops grinding forward below. But the Luftwaffe fought with cornered ferocity. A lucky 30mm round from a FW-190 clipped Kerr's wing, the impact jarring the airframe and forcing an asymmetric thrust that tested Tom's alloys to their limit. Kerr nursed the bird back, landing with smoke trailing. But not before his wingman, a fresh-faced replacement named Logan Mitchell from Edmonton, his first sortie, bought it in a head-on collision, the young pilot's Spitfire vanishing in a plume over Troon. Reginald arrived at the strip as medics swarmed, his face ashen, confiding to Harlan over a shared cigarette. "We've trapped them, but at what cost?" Eliza tallied the footage in the dim tent light. Her calculations grim. 22 kills that day alone, the props enabling twice the engagements of unmodified squadrons, their speed compressing the gap before panzers could slip free. Tom, patching Kerr's aircraft with rivets heated over a Coleman stove, grunted approval. These blades held, Jerry's running out of aces. As dusk fell, the gap narrowed to a killing zone, Canadian artillery pounding the remnants while the Contra monsters patrolled the perimeter, their presence a psychological hammer that shattered German morale. News from Montgomery's HQ praised the air umbrella, crediting the Canadian-flown speed demons for the encirclement's success. But Reginald knew the victory's underbelly, bodies cooling in the fields, letters undelivered to prairie homes. August's swelter baked the Norman plains into a forge of retribution, as the Falaise slaughter culminated in a rout that propelled the Allies toward the Seine, the contra-rotating Spitfires evolving from guardians to executioners in the pursuit. Reginald, coordinating with RCAF liaison officers who'd flown in from England, pushed for rapid retrofits, blueprints winged to Montreal, where wartime factories retooled Spitfire lines with contra-prop assemblies, turning the invention into a transatlantic legacy. Harlan's squadron, blooded and lean, rotated to a captured Luftwaffe field near Lisieux, their aircraft serviced under olive drab awnings as ground crews. Many Canadian volunteers with toolkits from home swapped blades scarred by shrapnel. Flying Officer Alex Fraser, his tally at 7, tested the limits in ferry runs, clocking 472 in a shallow dive over the Vire, the props whine a requiem for the encircled. Kerr, bandaged but unbowed, led sweeps against stragglers, the torque cancellation allowing hairpin pursuits that netted a WW2 laden with desperate evacuees, its crash a pyre on the road to Paris. Bennett, his faith in the machine deepened by survival, confided to Eliza during a lull. "These props don't just fly, they forgive mistakes up there." She nodded, her hands oil black from Governor tweaks, incorporating field mods for the denser autumn air ahead. Tom Hargrove, now a squadron fixture, forged impromptu repairs with salvaged German steel. His innovations, self-sealing hubs, preventing fuel fires in hits that would have doomed lesser designs. The war's pivot accelerated. With Paris liberated in a whirlwind advance, the squadron flew celebratory patrols, their speeds enabling low-level salutes over the Champs-Élysées, French crowds waving from the streets below. Yet the idyll shattered in an ambush over the Ardennes foothills, where a hidden Geschwader of Me-262 jets, Luftwaffe's last gasp, streaked in at 540 miles per hour, their rockets outpacing even the Contra-monsters. Harlan's formation scattered, the props' agility saving them from annihilation as they evaded in a furious weave, Fraser downing one jet with a desperate overshoot before a missile clipped his tail, forcing a belly landing in a meadow. Reginald raced to the site, finding the pilot shaken but alive, the encounter a stark reminder that innovation begat countermeasures. Eliza's post-mortem revealed the jet's vulnerability in turns, her data fueling urgent memos for Allied jet pursuits. As September loomed with Market Garden's audacious gamble, the squadron tallied 40 more victories. Their Canadian Corps, reinforced by pilots like Sergeant Daniel Ross from Halifax, embodying the props' transatlantic triumph. But Reginald pondered the horizon. V2s raining on London, bulge brewing in the snow. The march to the Rhine unfolded in autumn's chill grip, with 602 Squadron at the vanguard of air supremacy. Their contra-Spitfires a blur of vengeance that crippled the Wehrmacht's Rhine crossings and set the stage for the fatherland's fall. Reginald, promoted to advisory role with Chef, liaised from a requisitioned chateau near Reims. His Idiotic contraption now standard in RCF wings. Production lines in Fort William churning out Merlin's tune for the props' demands. Harlan, gaunt from ceaseless ops, commanded from the cockpit more than the ground, his flight sweeping the skies over Aachen, where the props' 470-mile-per-hour edge turned patrols into preemptions, shattering Stuka dive bombers before they could rally. Kerr and Bennett formed an inseparable pair. Their tandem tactics, born of Canadian logging camaraderie, exploiting the stability for scissor ambushes that felled FW-190s fleeing the Ruhr. Eliza, embedded with the mobile workshop, iterated relentlessly, variable pitch enhancements for high-altitude chases, her genius ensuring the blades bit deeper into the thinning air. Tom, coordinating shipments from liberated Antwerp docks, delivered composites laced with captured German polymers, the alloys evolving to shrug off 20mm fire. The squadron's Canadians swelled with reinforcements. Corporation Nathan Wright from Vancouver, a wiry navigator turned fighter jock, infusing fresh vigor as they claimed the skies over the Siegfried Line. In a brutal November clash near the Hurtgen Forest, Harlan's formation intercepted a bomber stream targeting the Remagen bridgehead, the contra-props propelling them into the fray at speeds that compressed the battle into minutes. Kerr's deflection shot vaporizing a He-177, Bennett's pursuit nailing its escort in a torque-free roll that left observers gasping. Flak and Jets exacted tribute. A V-1 buzz bomb clipped Fraser's wing during a ferry, the pilot parachuting into enemy lines and enduring a harrowing evasion before SAS extraction. But the system's resilience shone, with 80% of damaged aircraft returning via the props' forgiving thrust. Reginald debriefed in candlelit sessions, his notebooks chronicling the human calculus. Over 100 kills since Normandy, the speed saving countless ground pounders in the push to the Elbe. As winter deepened, with Bastogne besieged and the Bulge biting back, the squadron flew mercy runs, their endurance, bolstered by the props' efficiency, delivering spotters for artillery that broke the German salient. Eliza confided to Reginald amid the snow, "We've turned the tide, but the cost. It's in their eyes." He agreed, the forge of 1941 now a continent-spanning blaze. Yet whispers of Pacific redeployment stirred, the monsters destined for kamikaze hunts. Victory's bitter dawn broke in May 1945, as the Contra-Spitfires roared over the rubble of Berlin, their pilots witnessing the Reich's death throes from cockpits that had carried them from idiotic sketches to immortal legend. Reginald stood on a balcony in a shattered Brussels hotel, binoculars trained on the horizon where Harlan's final patrol swept low, the props' whine a fading echo of defiance. The squadron, its Canadian heart intact despite the graves from Falaise to the Oder, Kerr commanding now, Bennett his steadfast second, had amassed ace status, their speeds instrumental in the Rhine crossings and Elbe patrols that hastened the end. Eliza, awarded the Order of the British Empire in a quiet ceremony, archived the data for post-war aviation, her hydraulics inspiring jet-era controls. Tom Hargrove, back in Sheffield's Peace, forged civilian props from the wartime molds, his alloys bridging war to progress. Nathan Wright and Daniel Ross, among the survivors, shared toasts in the mess, their stories of 470-mile-per-hour miracles bound for Ottawa's halls. Harlan, retiring to a farm in Ontario, clasped Reginald's hand one last time. "Your madness won the war, mate, but it stole pieces of us all." As the squadron disbanded, aircraft mothballed in hangars from Vancouver to Vickers, Reginald gazed at a lone Spitfire under VE Day sun, its contrablades still. Yet he uncovered a hidden memo in declassified files. A captured German engineer had reverse-engineered the props for a desperate Me-101 variant, nearly turning the tide in '44. The revelation chilled him. The idiotic spark had ignited foes too, but sparked a new curiosity. What shadows lingered in the peace, waiting for the next storm?